Hi everybody. I'm going to review with us some very useful information that we learned at Landmark College from Dr. Thomas E. Brown of Yale. He was a past trustee as well as a noted researcher on the topic of attention deficit, especially in older adolescents and adults. And his groundbreaking book, Attention Deficit Disorder, The Unfocused Mind in Children and Adults, lays out his views and research about the various components of executive function in a way that we found really useful at Landmark College in helping us both understand and talk to our students in very specific terms about the executive function issues that most impacted their performance. And we really like his kind of overall presenting quote because it's so descriptive of so many students at Landmark. How can someone who is so smart and who can concentrate so well on some things have ADHD? So, moving to the next slide. So Dr. Brown divides executive functions into 6 overlapping areas that work together in various combinations, and he's quick to point out that there are for students or any individual with executive function difficulty, they may have difficulty in 1, 2, 3, or possibly all of these areas. But we found in practical experience talking to students specifically and trying to help them analyze and summarize which areas impact them the most has been very useful for prioritizing and developing strategies. So the 6 areas are activation, focus, effort, emotion, memory, and action, and we'll talk a little bit about each one in turn. So activation has to do with getting started, jump-starting. So many of our students have difficulties with procrastination and getting started at the appropriate time before the 11th hour plus. So it has to do with organizing, prioritizing, and activating to get underway. Next area is focus. Once you get underway, sustaining, maintaining your focus on the task at hand, not getting distracted either internally or externally by stray thoughts or things in the environment, but also, very importantly, shifting focus when it's time to move on, not perseverating and getting stuck in the process. The next area has to do with effort. So yes, you have to maintain your focus, but you also have to maintain your mental energy, your effort. And it starts with just being there, being in the right place at the right time, and being awake. And as we know that many of our students with attention deficit have significant difficulties with sleep and arousal issues. They're often night owls. They're often performing at their best in the middle of the night. As we found at Landmark, our server gets the most hits between 2 and 4 a.m. That's when our students, many of them, are really up and active. But this is a problem if you have classes the next morning. So just being able to regulate your sleep pattern to the environment in which your tasks are laid out, and then sustaining the effort and also working at an appropriate speed, not too fast, not rushing through things just to get them done, and not too slowly. Dr. Brown's significant contribution is in the area of emotion, emotional regulation. He includes regulating emotion as one of the executive functions, and we know that there is a direct connection between limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, and just managing frustration, being able to put something upsetting on the back burner and focus on the task at hand can be very difficult. A lot of students with attention issues are also emotionally volatile, going from highs to lows. We're not talking about bipolar, but we are talking about a fair amount of smaller dysregulation. Memory, in particular, working memory, is considered one of the executive functions. So being able to hold information in your mind while you attempt to strategize, plan, and carry out tasks is critical, and we know that working memory tends to be weaker in our students with attention deficit issues. And finally, action. putting it all together and acting, performing, behaving, and also having the monitor on that lets you observe your behaviors and check in whether you're on the right track, whether you're going off on a tangent, whether you're on target and on schedule. So as you can see on the bottom, Thomas Brown says these kind of all occur on a continuum. They certainly include motivation and problem solving as part of the executive functions. And just to elaborate a little bit on each of these areas, so to give you some specific examples, if we look at activation, we often see issues in difficulty with organizational skills. So the student who really has a hard time organizing their course content, notes and notebooks and papers all over the place, or they don't show up in class with what's needed. They're always losing assignments, notebooks, textbooks. If you hang out around our campus, you'll often see notebooks and textbooks in odd random places around the campus. And also under activation, difficulty getting started, prioritizing essential tasks, and then moving into action. So managing assignments, papers, and projects, figuring out what has to be done when, especially what has to be done first, and just a lot of procrastination around starting and or completing tasks. So often there are a lot of open screens, a lot of open tasks, a lot of open to-do lists simultaneously competing for attention. In the area of focus, we see difficulties with papers and projects that deteriorate over time due to inconsistent focus. So start out really strong and then kind of peter out or never get done at all. Very subject to distractions, and we see this with students who can't stay off Facebook or internet, other kinds of social media while they're trying to complete a writing assignment on their computer. And because of these gaps in attention and focus in class, a lot of gaps in learning. Just you blanked out, you missed something really essential. Another component has to do with being able to then shift your attention when it's appropriate to the next task at hand. And so we see very inconsistent performance between courses. Might be doing brilliantly in one course and there's a lot of focus and effort, and then pretty much nothing in another course. And then, as we mentioned, deteriorating or inconsistent quality with projects that have to be completed over time. In the area of effort, so difficulty sustaining effort results in incomplete assignments, poor study skills, often not really engaging at a deep level, processing very superficially. We see a lot of difficulty with the sleep arousal pattern. So students who literally fall asleep in class, not just in the morning classes. Students who try to get by on a radically small amount of sleep, or they sleep for 12, 14 hours straight on the weekend and try to pull all-nighters during the week. And interestingly enough, students who appear to lack motivation. Motivation is definitely tied into executive function, into the reward systems of the brain, and these students appear to be, have character flaw in terms of low motivation, when in fact this tends to be a cognitive issue that can be addressed strategically. We may see some students with slow processing. That means that it takes them extra long to complete what the next student can do readily, and that their written output tends to be poor as a result. Moving on to emotions, a lot of difficulty managing anger, managing frustration. So we see irritability, sometimes we see angry outbursts in class. I observed actually for the first time a fist fight breakout in the cafeteria last week, which was actually not the usual course of things, but difficulty accepting someone else's point of view, kind of being in your own head. And so a lot of argumentation in class. This can be really difficult in terms of moderating class discussions. And sometimes they appear to be very insensitive to other students because they're so wrapped up in their own emotional response, or they react way out of proportion to what seems like a mild provocation. Moodiness, we see that often in female students particularly. And then finally, working memory. And we talked about being able to hold and process information. So difficulty holding on to your thoughts as you're trying to organize them to talk. So sometimes these students really kind of just burst in and interrupt in a conversation because they're really afraid, literally, that they're going to lose that thought that is at the forefront of their brain, but not for long. So interrupting, a lot of difficulty with recall on tests, and these gaps in reading comprehension because of the inconsistent attention to details as you're reading, especially longer passages, and kind of analogously difficulty with writing. Then finally, in the area of action and behaviors, difficulty being able to regulate in terms of what would be appropriate comments in social contexts, or to understand and perceive how others are viewing you, difficulty slowing down, following directions, and in terms of impulsive acts.